Great. Let me just pull up our presentation.
Sounds good.
How's that looking for everybody?
That's looking great.
Okay, awesome. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this webinar. Normally, I've done these presentations in person and I force everyone to do a little grounding exercise with me where we get up and move our bodies a little bit. But since this is a virtual presentation, I'm just going to invite everyone to take about 30 seconds to just close your eyes, take maybe 3 to 5 full breaths. And I want you to reflect on what your connection to water is and think about what's bringing you to this presentation. So I'm going to do that with you and mute myself real quick for 30 seconds and we'll join in. All right. Going to invite you just to open up your eyes, connect back in, and we'll get started here. So we're just going to do a quick introduction to get you all familiar with CEI and what we do. And then we'll really dive into the meat of our presentation here, focusing in on our stormwater challenges, our approaches to how we try to solve some of them, and then how we've been able to fund them in different projects through multiple grants and partnerships. And then we'll wrap up with a little bit on what you can do yourself to mitigate some challenges that come with stormwater. So a little bit about the Community Ecology Institute. We are a Howard County-based nonprofit with a mission to cultivate communities where people and nature thrive. We strive to do this primarily through experiential education, but how that plays out in our day-to-day really looks like a lot of different things. One of those being stormwater management in our properties and throughout our community as well. We were founded in 2016 and have grown quite a bit since then. We have about 26 full or part-time staff members and 7 core educational programs. And then our 2 properties that we primarily steward are Freetown Farm and the Green Pharmacy Garden. Here is just a little graphic to show the main things that CEI tries to do as an organization to distill some of the disparate ideas that sometimes seem to float around our organization. So the work that I primarily do is on Freetown Farm. So Freetown Farm is the property that we steward in Columbia. It's a 6.4 acre farm that was previously farmed organically as a CSA production. So it's community supported agriculture. So it was primarily producing vegetables for the community and for retail sale. It is now deed restricted as an agricultural space. So that means it's going to be growing for agricultural purposes in perpetuity. And it is also the last working farm in Columbia. And this is the space where I'm spending most of my time at CEI. Our other property is the Green Pharmacy Garden. So this is the property that we steward in Fulton, Maryland. It's about 6.5 acres. And it's a piece of land that was previously the home of the ethnobotanist Dr. Jim Duke and his family. He used this land to create a garden that was focusing on medicinal plants and herbs based on the book that he wrote, which has the same name, The Green Pharmacy. And it currently has about 300 or so species of medicinal plants. This is one of our more recent acquirements or purchases that CEI made. So we were able to get this property about 2 winters ago in 2022 and have been continuing to breathe life into this space and figure out how it can be a part of the CEI family. And it looks very different than our Freetown Farm space. So we're working with two unique properties in Howard County. These are our 7 core educational programs. Each of these programs has been created in response to a need in our community or an opportunity in our community to engage more people. And these were created to reach people from across the lifespan. So we're a very intergenerational organization. And the program that we're going to be focusing in on today, just because it's the program that is most connected to our stormwater work, is the Agroecology in Action program. So Agroecology in Action program's mission is to empower people to improve the health of their community, and that's focusing on its people and ecosystems by growing and sharing food and knowledge. So we're able to grow and share food in a way that also is able to mitigate the harmful impacts of excessive stormwater. And what that looks like is prioritizing our soil health through a variety of practices like cover cropping, rotating our crops, planting perennial plants, practicing no-till agriculture, and reducing our overall inputs in our growing spaces. It also looks like using food forest practices and agroforestry practices, creating edible landscapes and pollinator meadows to transition lawn spaces into more ecologically meaningful spaces, and then also using culture growing, and then finally stormwater best management practices both on-site our properties and then off-site as well. So stormwater management really is baked into our farming approach, and we try to make sure that we're living into being good stewards of the watershed whenever we're also thinking about how we're going to be able to produce food for our community. However, even with all those practices, we still face challenges and have a lot of work to do to be able to continue producing food for our community for decades to come and making sure our watershed stays healthy. I just want to set the context for where we are. So this is Howard County, and there's 8 watersheds in the county. So Freetown Farm falls here in the Middle Patuxent watershed. So that's the blue star here. And the Green Pharmacy Garden is in the Patuxent watershed. So we're working in 2 different watersheds with both our properties. And each of the properties have streams that are in that flow through them. So we are directly connected to our watersheds. In Freetown Farm, there is actually an unmarked stream on the Howard County maps that flows into the Middle Patuxent River. And then we have our stream in the Green Pharmacy Garden that then flows into, I believe, the Hammond Branch. So some of the challenges that we face on both of our properties are inherited challenges that came from before our time stewarding the land, and then some we're seeing new pop up the longer that we stay at these properties. So some of the main culprits for our challenges are impervious surfaces. So just across the street from Freetown Farm is a newer high school. It's the Atherton High School. Whenever it was developed, there was a lot of new impervious surfaces that were created. And so whenever there's a large rain event, we're going to see a lot of water that's no longer being saturated into the ground and coming across the street onto our property. And where we're situated in Simpsonville, which is the out parcel of Columbia, that area was historically agricultural space. So it was a lot of family farms. And in recent history, there's been a lot of rapid development. And with that development into neighborhoods or retail spaces, we're seeing a lot of impervious surfaces created as well. So we're seeing landscape change, creating impervious surfaces that are impacting our flow of stormwater onto our farm. The natural topography is also a challenge. So our farm is sloped pretty much north to south. And so on the north end, upslope, we're having a lot of water come from those impervious surfaces and flowing through the farm to the streams at the bottom of our property in the south. And so we want to be really aware of how that topography is impacting our growing spaces, but also what's being carried along. If water is going to be flowing through our farm, what might it be picking up as it goes into our waterways? Flooding is another issue. So flooding can cause significant damage to our infrastructure on the property. Where educational space, we have classrooms, we have sheds, we have greenhouses. All of it is impacted by large storm events that cause flooding. And then also our growing spaces are impacted as well. So it's very hard to be producing vegetables during a super rainy season whenever your seedlings are getting washed away, your soil's getting washed away. So it's impacting us both financially whenever there is a loss of crop, or if there's damage to any of our infrastructure, but then also it's impacting our ecosystem as well. And the streams that are on both our properties, they are significantly cut from flooding events. They have those very stereotypical high banks with, you can see where a lot of soil has been washed away during these large flooding events. And so we also want to be aware of the soil that's being taken away during those flooding events in our stream spaces as well. And then finally, as a small to medium-sized nonprofit, we have to balance multiple priorities. So we have to think about the food production that we are focusing on for our community. We're focusing on creating community workshops and events and education. And then we're also focusing on restoring our ecosystem and creating new habitat as well. So there's these multiple priorities that we have to balance and find the right flow for where we are situated in our community. These are two videos that are from this past winter. This is our wettest season that I've experienced at the farm in these past 2 years. So the winter can be a challenging time whenever the vegetation is going into its dormant state. It's not sucking up as much water as it normally would. And we're just experiencing these really wet winters that are bringing in large rainstorms. And our gardens just can't handle it. And you're seeing our pathways turning into rivers and streams. And that's bringing with it soil that is really valuable to us as a regenerative agricultural production. Our soil is really important. We put a lot of work into creating healthy soils. And so whenever it's taken away, it hurts me as a grower, but also thinking about all that nutrient-rich soil being washed away into our waterways, thinking about what impact that has as well. And then this video on the right, I'm just going to show, this is one of our newer BMPs. This is a rain garden, and it's just been awash with water this winter. So even with the BMPs that we have recently installed, there's still work to do to be able to just address the quantity of water that we're seeing. So this is what we're working with in terms of impervious surfaces. This is Freetown Farm in Columbia. The large swath of red here is Atholton High School. So everything in red here is an impervious surface. And this road here is Harriet Tubman Lane. And so a lot of water is flowing down here. These sports fields aren't characterized in this map as an impervious surface, but really I think they should be. They're not doing a lot as a like vegetation to be able to suck up water. A lot of that really just flows across the surface of sports fields. And so we're seeing that impact our entire farm, not just the front of it, and it flows downstream or downslope to the south here. This is the Green Pharmacy Garden. So it is immediately in a bit more of a residential space, but then we're seeing still a lot of retail space and just neighborhoods and just impervious surfaces that are impacting how water flows through the Green Pharmacy Garden as well. So with those challenges, some of what CEI tries to do to address them are putting in best management practices, not only on our own properties, but throughout the community as well. We try to promote lawn transition on our properties, but do a lot of education on just beneficial alternatives to lawns that folks in the community can apply to their own spaces. Education as a whole is always something that is going to go a really long way. So we're not just putting in these BMPs, we're not just doing these projects, we're letting people know why we're doing it and what they can do to make sure that they're empowered to be able to have an impact in their community as well. And then focusing on things like perennial planting, doing that long-term thinking whenever we're doing any sort of planting projects of what decades down the line the impact of this plant is going to have. And then very slowly working on some forest restoration on both of our properties as well. So here I'll pass it over to Kiara to dive into the grants.
All right. Thank you so much, Simon, for kind of painting the picture of who we are and what we do specifically around stormwater management. And it's so specifically informed by how we're situating in our communities. So I think that characterization will hopefully help to root the deep dive I'm going to do into some of the bigger projects we've done specifically around stormwater. So I'm actually going to walk us through 6 different grants that we've received from a couple different funders, the Chesapeake Bay Trust being a primary funder for our stormwater management work, but also the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and Howard County government has a stormwater grant. In total, we have been able to receive over $460,000 in primarily capital focused grants addressing stormwater management since 2020. So that is a lot of money for our organization, certainly. I think it's a lot of money, period, unless maybe you're working at the state or federal level. But it's allowed us to really transform our spaces in some really impactful ways. And as Simon said, the longer we are connected to these 2 particular pieces of property in our community, the more we learn, and water is inherently fluid, so things change. But I want to share a little bit about each of these grants because I think they help to explain how we've been able to make some of the impacts we have, which have been really transformative for us as land stewards. So next slide. So the Community Ecology Institute, as Simon described, was founded in 2016. At that point in time, we had 2, actually just one small kind of grassroots youth environmental education program that we led on other people's properties, other farms, community open space, parks, etc. In 2018, we started a second, more in-depth program, again, youth environmental education focused. And so for our first few years, we were out in the community trying to really connect with different partners and really help to connect our youth in the Howard County area to the environment. Our entire work is kind of based on 3 significant life experiences that research tells us helps to create lifelong environmental stewards, which is time in nature as early and often as possible, the presence of a mentor that helps you to feel connected to the environment and learn what it's all about, and the chance to make a difference. And so that really informs those 2 programs and continues to inform what we do. And I think it's because of that sort of research-based community connected work. In 2018, we got the invitation to come out and see what was then known as Shaw Farm that Simon described. And the previous individual who'd been farming it organically for 40 years was looking for a new buyer. He was aging out of being able to farm it and really wanted to ensure that it wouldn't become developed. And so we had this wild year where we worked with the community and were able to secure the funds in order to become the stewards of what is now known as Freetown Farm in the summer of 2019. In that process, we really tried to understand what it meant to be a landowner in that particular part of the community. We did a lot of community outreach, talking to neighbors, talking to different organizations that worked in the area. And the first thing we heard 2 things. One, thank you for protecting it, not developing it. So that was definitely something that people wanted, was to preserve this particular farm. Again, it's the last working farm in the town of Columbia. But 2, we heard loud and clear that there were stormwater issues coming from all that impervious area that Simon described. And a lot of the residential neighbors and business neighbors were super frustrated by it. They had tried to elevate their concerns about stormwater flooding to different powers that be, Board of Education, county, soil conservation district, et cetera, for over a decade, and they hadn't really gone anywhere. So as an environmentally focused nonprofit, we decided to lean in there. Also, the flooding was perhaps worse across what is now Freetown Farm. The water from Appleton was actually piped onto the farm decades ago, and the previous owner created another pipe and piped it to his boundary, which created huge flooding for the next street. And so it was really like a pretty acute issue. So before we actually even closed on the purchase of Freetown Farm, we had a letter from the previous owner for a grant to the Chesapeake Bay Trust to help us get a handle on what was happening there. So our first grant from the Chesapeake Bay Trust for this issue, we called Farm-Based Opportunities for Restoration and Community Education. It was a watershed assistance grant, and it was really helping us to bring out professionals. In this case, it was biohabitats to help us make an ecological master plan for the property, really understand those streams, how they connect to the river, understand our small wetland, and really think through what the appropriate uses were for this property. It is small for a farm, but for a piece of land that's fairly intact in Columbia, it's rather large. So we created an ecological master plan with support from biohabitats, and that plan had a specific design for some stormwater management practices that we're going to try to get at that acute issue of piped stormwater being directed onto Freetown Farm and then being redirected into neighbors. So we then went into phase 2 of that grant, which was the actual installation of those best management practices. So that was the following year. And then we really worked with a variety of community partners. And I think that's one of the most important things about what CEI does, is this effort to always reach out and work in collaboration with other nonprofits, government sector, different local organizations, businesses, scout troops, etc. So we pulled our resources and pulled our community in together, and we began to get at the work in the ground of fixing some of these issues in our community. So this is just a quick glimpse of a part of that ecological master plan, really laying out how the surface flows, were happening across Freetown Farm, what the topography is like, as Simon described. It really is not obviously a hill. It's not a radical slope, but it's for sure a hill. All you have to do is be out there in the rain and the water just flows and creates its own pathways. So we created that ecological master plan with a real focus on stormwater. And then the next slide. And really looked at where there was good kind of existing conditions to go ahead and install some BMPs. The biggest one, and the one that kind of associated with this particular grant series that we're talking about now, is in the upper left-hand corner where you see the A. That was kind of a fallow field filled with just organic matter, down trees, looked quite a mess. We identified that as the right place to put in a rather large bioretention pond. Large for us. If you look at the size of the property, that bioretention pond is, a good chunk of what it is. And to then plant around that bioretention pond to be a wildflower meadow. So that was one of the biggest ones. We also identified the need for some berms and swales. We identified the need for some wetland buffers. We have not yet begun to get at stream restoration. That's going to be another grant in another year, hopefully. But the first mover for us was this bioretention pond so that we could stop passing the water off to the neighboring street. Next slide. So this is a little bit more detailed. If anybody gets really excited about this and wants to actually see some of this content in greater detail, we are happy to share. But this was phase 2 of that grant cycle, was the capital funds to go ahead and get the engineered design and then get the right contractors in place to do that. So we, where the water first comes onto the property, we created a swale and berm series, and then it flows under our driveway, and we kind of cut that pipe that was carrying it to the neighbor and sunk all that water into the bioretention pond, which looked very much like a kind of organically shaped swimming pool when it was being dug out. It was a pretty large project for us at that time in our evolution as an organization. Next slide. So these are some pictures, kind of before, during, and after. I don't know that there's a picture. There's not a picture of here of me stuck in the middle of it when it was under construction. I got a little excited and jumped in, but it is filled with all the different levels of media that are necessary to allow that water to infiltrate. We actually hopefully never see standing water in that bioretention pond. It is heavily planted with native species, and we are seeing a lot of success in terms of that pond being able to hold the water from your typical storm. Simon mentioned quantity. We're getting these really flashy, high volume storms. It is not sufficient, not designed to be sufficient to hold all the water coming off Atholton High School in our one little bioretention pond. They have their own stormwater management ponds, and we'll talk about that. But that was a big project for us. The next thing we did is really understanding better. Now we're 2 years into being at Freetown Farm, really understanding better the neighborhood that we're living in. Not only is there Atholton right across the street, right next to Atholton is the Harriet Tubman School, which was the last segregated high school in Howard County. It didn't close until 1964. And it was a kind of administrative building for the school system for a long time. And recently, since we've been in the community, been restored into a cultural education center. So if people are local and they don't know that space, come see us, come see the Harriet Tubman Center. Right behind the Harriet Tubman Center is the Grassroots Crisis Intervention Center, which is the local homeless shelter. We have several faith communities. There's quite a bit happening right where we are at Freetown Farm, and we wanted to take the time to deepen our relationships with those community partners and to understand what it would look like if we had a walkable watershed. That is a kind of a concept, I think, coined by a company called Skio. They had done a walkable watershed. They're based in Virginia. They have done some walkable watershed projects in the DC area and the Richmond area. And it's really kind of thinking about how water flows through your community and then also how people flow through your community and trying to build relationships between people in the watershed through these points of possible connectivity. So this was not a capital project. This was a project where we really looked at the map. We identified kind of a triangle that made sense for us in terms of our scope and our scale and the different community partners that are situated where we are, and started to think about what are the opportunities and challenges specific to where we live and how they impact the Middle Patuxent River, and really just dove deep. We did a lot of stakeholder engagement conversations about where do people walk, what do people do people know that the river is down the hill, are they familiar with the important cultural history of this particular piece of land. So I think the next slide. So ultimately, we ended up coming up with a concept plan that has a lot of recommendations for what might be community or capital projects. We certainly are not correctly positioned within the scope of this entire community to lead on all of them, but we have started leading on some of them. And we're hoping that this walkable watershed concept plan will help other stakeholders like the school system, for example, like faith communities, like the Columbia Association, to think more holistically about how our community is connected to our watershed. So it's a neat document. There's not a whole lot of these walkable watersheds out there, so we can send you that final report if you're interested. So then moving along, we started thinking about what next. What next really was clearly how do we get Atholton to hold more of their water? We could actually stand out in the rain and see water bypassing both stormwater management ponds that are directly across the street from our property. They were just bypassing them, totally circumnavigating the ponds. The ponds would stay dry. The water would go down the service road, cross the street, cross a bus yard, go into the farm, and just really create flooding throughout the area. So our next goal, which felt fairly bold, was to work with the school system and to work with Atholton High School in particular to get a grant through the Chesapeake Bay Trust grant system to fix those ponds. There's no reason that all that water should be leaving Atholton's premises. Most of it should be infiltrating. So our phase one there in 2020 was to get an infrastructure concept plan for Atholton High School. Phase two was to get the engineered design, and phase three was to get the capital funding to put the fix in the ground. And we finished that last year. We actually just put in our final little tidbit of first year maintenance fees for that project. So that is all complete now. So what we really focused on in this graphic that Simon is showing is, if you see the corner of the school on the right-hand side of the screen, there's two bioretention ponds kind of bisected by a service road. We designed a approach to getting the water in the ponds. So basically it was fixing functionality that was just broken, missing, and really making sure that the water is being correctly directed into the ponds and that the ponds were able to hold the water, because one of the ponds was receiving some, but it was flowing straight out. So there was just a lot that needed to be done in terms of those stormwater ponds working. We also created some resources for education surrounding the ponds. We've installed signs, including no mow signs, because a lot of the problem in the stormwater ponds was that the big mowers would go down into the ponds and like break some of the infrastructure, some of the pipes that were in there. So no mow signs. We've planted with natives all along the banks of those ponds. We have educational signs, and we worked really closely with the Atholton High School students in green team in particular to get those ponds in, and hopefully they will be a part of the ongoing maintenance of those ponds as a part of their environmental education for the green team there. So that was a tough one. It was great. It's been really rewarding to go by and see those ponds filled with water, but to be the lead on a grant for a project, one that we don't own, but two that is owned by the Board of Education, there's just a lot of kind of complexities to doing that. And I would say one lesson learned is that permits will always, always, always take longer than expected. So that might be the biggest lesson learned from being these projects. But this has come along really well. So we did create a very in-depth engineered design. We had to put that through the permit process, get that approved at all levels from the Board of Education. The school grounds crew had to be highly involved with this and agree to let us do this work. And then obviously county permitting. So we got that done in 2021. And then 2022, we went ahead and got the improvements made. And part of what you see here, the center picture is actually us putting in a trench drain along the edge of some of the turf sports fields so that there is better water infiltration coming off those fields instead of just surface flow. And those are all directed into this kind of well type structure. And then they held water for the first time ever. So that's been great. And actually it's not grass along the edges, it's black-eyed Susans and other native plants. We planted some native trees as well. And that was a big investment. And we are seeing that our bioretention pond is better able to hold the water that it receives now in some of these bigger storm events. So it's all connected. Water flows downhill. So we went uphill to try to address some of the issues. Okay. And then
These are just the some of the educational signs. I was trying to go forward when you were talking about them to highlight them. But yeah, these are the signs that are installed actually right by the ponds so that anyone walking by, mostly students, will see what the ponds are there for and what are some of the benefits. So really highlighting the educational piece of this project as well.
Thanks. So our current grant, and we are in the process of this, we're about midway through. We, as Simon mentioned, became the stewards of the Green Pharmacy Garden in the winter of 2022. That meant last year was our first full year caring for that property, really trying to understand the legacy left by the Duke family around medicinal plants. So it's very different than Freetown Farm. The topography is also sloped. The size is similar. The fact that there are streams and wooded areas is similar. But the way that we are growing there is quite different. It's on 4 large terraced gardens as opposed to kind of more traditional agricultural beds and gardens. And there are stormwater issues there as well. They're rather different than the ones that we face at Freetown Farm. They're more kind of internal to the property itself. But we did get a outreach and restoration grant from the Chesapeake Bay Trust to start doing some more innovative small BMPs there. So we're doing log erosion barriers along some of these terraces. We've been doing some beaver dam analogs in a stream bed in partnership with Howard EcoWorks, doing some invasive removal and some native tree planting, trying to do some live staking along some of the eroded stream banks. So really just trying to connect with the environmental story of this property and the stormwater and watershed story of this property, because it has been so highly focused on medicinal plants historically, and getting more community engagement and collaboration on the property through these additional channels. So as you can see, it's very different looking than the farm. It's kind of this lush oasis. Over 300 different species of medicinal plants, as Simon mentioned, in these beautiful streams that lead right into a drinking water reservoir that are seriously eroded and often
Look at those,
dry.
look at those banks.
Yeah. So that, go ahead.
I was gonna say I can jump in on this one because I got to jump in partway through in a lot of these grants when I first started as a Chesapeake Conservation Corps member. And this grant here was really the first that I was able to be a part of from start to finish. So I got to do all the fun stuff with those old bioretention pond grants. We're actually getting to see them start to work, which was fun for me. But this is one of our grants from Howard County. So this is the Howard County Community Stormwater Partnership Grant. They put this one out every year, and it's really supposed to be a mix of Howard County-based infrastructural work, but then also educational outreach. So what we're able to do with this grant was primarily on Freetown Farm's property, just do 2 additional rain gardens. So we have a rain garden in one of our gardens that is supposed to demonstrate more of like a community garden space in an urban area. So it's all raised bed planting, and then water can flow to the back through some French drains to where the rain garden is. And so for that one, I wanted to highlight an edible rain garden to show the multiple uses that a rain garden can have. And so it'll be helping to deal with the excess water, but then also be an opportunity to use the space for growing food as well. And then we have one next to our new community engagement center. This is the previous barn on the property you can see in this picture here. And that one is to help with some of the wash off the roof, off of the patio. And it's really nice to have a BMP on the back half of the property for all of the spillover from the BMPs that are in the front half whenever they get overloaded. So these are the 2 rain gardens in their construction. We have the Grow It Eat It garden, rain garden here, and then our Watershed Lover rain garden near the Community Engagement Center. This one just happened to be a heart shape to maximize just the space that the rain garden could take up. So then we really kind of lived into that and planted mostly red and purple and like crimson native plants in that one. And this is the most recent update. This is the summer look at them. They are looking very jungly. It's hard to see in the grass here. We need to do a little bit of weeding, but there is some really lovely swamp milkweed that I see bees pollinating every time I walk by. We've got the red dogwood that's coming up, blazing star, all sorts of fun stuff. And here we have some raspberries, some native wild strawberries, a blueberry bush, but a lot of it, as you can see, is starting to get overgrown. So there's still some work to be done to get these to be fully outfitted. And then the final piece that I want to touch on for this grant is our Follow the Raindrop tour. And so that is a seasonal tour where people can come to our farm and get a chance to do a walkthrough. And we try to touch on all of our different best management practices on our property, but then also do a deeper dive into our growing methods and just our philosophy towards stormwater management as a farm. And it's kind of like a step in the walkable watershed where folks can use our property as a way to get more connected with their watershed. And really just the main goal for that one is trying to get people to think about where water goes, get them to think about what a watershed is, especially if it's their first time hearing the word. We really get a variety of folks with different experiences. And it's been a fun tour to do. The one challenge that I've noticed so far leading those tours is sometimes getting the buy-in from the community so that whenever people register, maybe not everyone shows up. So it is smaller numbers, but it is our first time doing the tour. So if we continue it in the future, my guess is that we'll start to see larger crowds as well. So really quickly, before we dive into the Q&A, because I know we're about at time there, I just wanted to leave y'all with a few solutions, just that we're not talking about these challenges. These are things that maybe you are familiar with depending on what kind of work you do, but as the agroecology coordinator, I'd be remiss if I didn't jump into a few plants here. So these are some trees, shrubs, flowers, and ground cover for different stormwater BMPs that you can use. And I really want to highlight this resource here. We can share this presentation out to folks later so they can access this resource. But there's a lot of resources out there showing what you can do with plants to help mitigate stormwater. And this is just a really great one to highlight some natives, shrubs specifically for stormwater, because shrubs are really great, especially in urban areas, because they don't take up quite as much space as trees. And then additionally, some things that you can do to manage stormwater. So there is opportunities to maximize best management practices in your own spaces. If you're in Howard County, there's a lot of community resources you can take advantage of. You can get free rain barrels from Alpha Ridge Landfill. You can take advantage of the Cleanscapes program, which helps fund BMP installations in your own properties. And there's lots of different tree giveaways. I'm less familiar with other counties throughout Maryland, but I am sure there's at least some resource you can find at the county level. So I would definitely recommend looking at there first as a place to get started with any sort of BMP work. A really simple thing that you can do if you don't already do it, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but just directing your downspouts, if you have them in your home spaces, to a pervious surface. So making sure they're not directed towards the driveways or sidewalks so that it doesn't just run off of your property into the storm drains. Reducing lawn space is always a plus. Lawns are not the best at soaking up stormwater. They have shallower root systems. So if you can convert all or some of your lawn space, it doesn't have to be all of it, with plants that are going to be more ecologically beneficial for the organisms in your native area, but then also for being able to suck up water during those large rain events that can be really impactful. And then finally, getting involved with local organizations that connect you to your watershed, whether that is actively trudging through a stream or even helping folks out with a volunteer management or maybe writing a grant. There's a lot that you can do getting involved, especially in Maryland, to connect you to your watershed. And it's a really great way to remind you why you jumped into this work in the first place. Again, here's another little QR code for stormwater management resources. And then here's lots of more information for if you want to stay in touch with us. The best thing you can do is check out our website here. A lot of great information there. Our socials are here. And we would love for folks to be able to actually come to our farm and check it out.